They said diplomacy was a dance of words, not blades. But the moment Elias Vorn stepped into the throne chamber of Xerios, he knew this would end in blood. The air shimmered with violet light, filtered through crystalline arches that formed the palace's dome. Alien courtiers lined the hall, their obsidian skin and luminous eyes watching him with veiled disdain. Beside him, Cash and Rule stood silent, his gloved hands behind his back, ever the perfect observer. He hadn't said much since they landed. Elias wondered, not for the first time, what Cashin was thinking behind that unreadable gaze. At the end of the hall, upon a throne of bone-white stone and coiled metal, sat Queen Zarina. Her crown rose like burning thorns, and her skin shimmered like the edge of a storm. She did not stand. She only tilted her head, and the chamber fell silent. "You come to negotiate, human," she said, voice melodic and razor-sharp. "And yet you arrive, unbowed." Elias held his ground. "Earth does not kneel for appearances. We came for alliance. Mutual gain." The Queen's smile didn't reach her golden eyes. "Then you must earn it." A soft sound echoed behind the pillars. From the shadows emerged a figure tall and lithe, clad in sleek battle armor the color of a dying star. Her silver hair shimmered as she moved. Her golden eyes locked on Elias. Sarin Thaler, champion of the Royal Guard. The blade of Zarina. Zarina raised a hand. "This is my answer, diplomat. You want Xerios' respect? Then defeat it. Here. Now." Gasps erupted from the crowd. Cashin stiffened, but said nothing. Elias didn't flinch. "You want me to fight your champion?" he asked, voice steady. "No, I want you to lose to her," Zarina said. "Publicly. Utterly. You will kneel before her as proof that Earth knows its place." Sarin stepped forward, her expression unreadable. "Shall we begin?" Elias removed his cloak, handed it to a startled attendant, and stepped into the circular combat ring of polished obsidian. Cashin moved closer to the edge, his arms still crossed, his mouth a thin line. Twin energy blades were brought forward, Zeryan dueling swords, glowing faintly with internal light. Elias took one, testing its weight. Different balance than Terran steel, but manageable. The Queen gave a lazy wave. "Begin." Sarin moved first, graceful, fluid, fast. Elias barely blocked the first flurry, the impact of her strikes sending vibrations up his arms. The crowd jeered. This was meant to be a lesson. A humiliation. But Elias had seen real war. He wasn't here for theater. He adjusted his stance, shifted to a lower guard, and began to respond not with brute strength, but with rhythm. With timing. With experience. Sarin's eyes flickered as his blade met hers, parried, riposted. He grazed her shoulder. Gasps again. Cashin leaned forward slightly. Sarin spun low, sweeping his legs. Elias jumped, countered, disarmed her with a twist that sent her sword skidding across the obsidian floor. Silence fell. Elias stood over her, blade at her throat, breathing hard. She stared up at him, golden eyes wide. "I yield," she said. The Queen rose. Not in applause, but in slow, simmering fury. "You were supposed to fall," she hissed. You were supposed to learn your place. Elias lowered the blade. Perhaps your place needs rethinking. The silence cracked. Zarina raised her hand to command the guards, but then a smile bloomed on her lips. Cold. Beautiful. Cruel. Very well. If he has won the right to stand beside Zerios, then he shall do so. Permanently. As husband to the champion he has shamed. Sarin rose slowly, eyes narrowing. What? Elias said, stunned. Cashin said nothing. The queen's voice rang like iron through crystal. The ceremony will be immediate. Marriage is the ancient custom of sealing combat between equals. Let the galaxy see what Earth has earned. As the crowd erupted in murmurs, Cashin's jaw tightened. He turned away, his silhouette dark against the luminous stone. Elias stood in the center of a foreign court, a sword still in hand, a stunned warrior beside him, and a crown of obligations slowly tightening around his throat. Cashin's voice echoed in his head, from days before, "Be careful, Eli. Every victory has a cost." Now Elias began to wonder, what had he just truly won? The royal shuttle sliced through the dusky skies of Zerios, its metallic hull gleaming like a falling star. Inside, Elias Vorn sat in contemplative silence, his eyes fixed on the capital slowly disappearing beneath the clouds. Beside him, Sarin Thaler remained unreadable, her arms crossed tightly over her armored chest. They hadn't spoken since the forced ceremony. The glowing bind mark on their hands still shimmered faintly, a cruel reminder that neither of them had chosen this. Elias broke the silence first. "You didn't have to go easy on me." Sarin's eyes flicked to him. "I didn't." He studied her profile for a moment, the sharp angles of her cheekbones, the unnatural glow of her irises, the way her lips tensed when she was annoyed. "Well," he muttered, half smiling, "then I must have had a very lucky day." She said nothing. Outside the viewport, the Zeryan capital vanished behind the ridges of a jagged mountain range. Their journey to the outer districts had begun. "For show," the queen said. "For optics. For the camera drones that followed discreetly behind." Elias could feel it already, how carefully choreographed it all was. The heroic human groom. The proud alien bride. The symbolic union of two worlds. A story for the galaxy. A farce in slow motion. Back in the palace, Cashin Rule watched it all unfold from the command deck of the diplomatic wing. His hands gripped the edge of a hollow table, where images of Elias and Sarin flickered in real time, framed by celebratory graphics and broadcast symbols. "A marriage," the headlines said. "A triumph of diplomacy." Cashin knew better. He saw it for what it was. He tapped a hidden command into the table. The official feed vanished, replaced by encrypted footage, internal transmissions, command orders, security overrides. One file caught his eye, a classified directive from Queen Zarina's office. He opened it and froze. The document laid it out in chilling detail. Elias was to be paraded as a symbol. A puppet. Every movement, every speech, every step with Sarin beside him would be scripted. His image would be broadcast not just across Zerios, but into every Terran-controlled system. The goal was clear: reshape the human narrative, prove that Earth had submitted. Without firing a single shot. Cashin closed the file, his jaw clenched. His friend, his brother in arms, was being turned into a tool. And Elias didn't even see it. Not yet. On the shuttle, Elias and Sarin had moved into the rear compartment, where soft lighting and privacy screens gave the illusion of comfort. He poured them both a cup of steaming synth tea and offered one to her. She accepted it with a nod, their fingers brushing briefly. "So," Elias said, settling across from her. "This is what marriage looks like in Zeryan custom." "Only when the queen wants it to," she said dryly. Then, after a pause, "It wasn't meant to be you?" He raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Sarin looked down into her cup. Her voice softened, losing its usual edge. "There was another. Years ago. Before I was chosen to serve the throne." Elias leaned forward. "Someone you loved?" Her eyes met his, and for a brief moment, her mask cracked. "Yes." He didn't press. The silence between them was no longer cold, it was reflective, almost tender. He saw the woman behind the blade. The reluctant participant in a political game neither of them had designed. "Do you miss him?" Elias asked quietly. A beat passed. Every day. Cashin stood alone in a vast archive chamber beneath the palace. Holograms flickered to life around him, past footage, profiles, security dossiers. He pulled up the file on Sarin Thaler. Champion. Royal Guard. Honor-bound. And then, tucked deep in the classified section, he found it. A record of her early training. A photo, grainy, old, but unmistakable. A younger Sarin, smiling slightly, standing beside a man in Terran military gear. Cashin. He staggered back a step. The Queen had known. She had used it. She had chosen Elias not randomly, not politically, but precisely because Sarin's past would ensure conflict. Emotional entanglement. Leverage. Cashin turned off the display. He felt sick. On the shuttle, night had fallen. Elias and Sarin sat in silence once more, the stars of Zerios streaking past the windows. The tension between them had shifted, less sharp, more uncertain. Elias leaned his head back. "I never asked for this." "Neither did I," she replied. "But here we are. Bound. Watched. Celebrated for something neither of us wanted." Sarin's expression softened. "You fought with honor. You didn't treat the duel like a game." He gave a tired smile. "It wasn't. You could have killed me." She hesitated. "I might have. If it had been anyone else." Their eyes met again, and something fragile hung between them. A breath. A question not asked. Cashin stared out from a high balcony, watching the city lights flicker. Below, holograms of Elias and Sarin danced in endless loop celebration, unity, hope, lies. He touched the edge of a blade hidden in his coat. Not yet. Not now. But soon. He had loved her once. And he had just begun to hate the man who took her away. The first sign was the nausea. Subtle at first, an unsettled stomach after meals, a dizzy spell under the double suns, but enough to make Sarin pause. She dismissed it. Training, stress, climate. But deep down, something ancient and instinctual stirred. It wasn't until she stumbled during a debrief with Elias, the edges of her vision blurring for a heartbeat, that concern turned into certainty. She excused herself and retreated to her quarters in the diplomatic compound. There, she accessed the embedded nanoscanner beneath her clavicle laser yon military-grade device meant for injury detection. What it confirmed left her breathless. Pregnant. She sat frozen on the edge of the bed, her armored boots still on, her breath shallow. It wasn't supposed to be possible. Not like this. Not with a human. Not now. A knock came. Elias's voice followed. "Sarin? You all right?" She stood quickly, smoothing her expression, and opened the door. "You didn't look well," he said, studying her. "I'm fine," she lied. "Just fatigue." He nodded, but something in his eyes lingered. Concern. Maybe more. Later that night, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling of their shared quarters. Elias had drifted to sleep on the other side of the room, curled in a chair with a daytop pad still glowing faintly in his lap. His face, even in rest, carried the weight of too many roles: diplomat, warrior, husband. Unwilling pawn. Her hand moved instinctively to her lower abdomen. She didn't feel different. But she was. And the question that twisted her stomach more than a nausea was not how, but who. Because between Elias Bourne and Cassian rules she didn't know. Cassian had been gone for weeks. After his resignation from the diplomatic mission, he'd vanished from Zeryon space. Or so it seemed. But Sarin knew better. She could feel it, like a storm forming beyond the ridge. In a shadowed alley of the outer district, Cassian moved like a ghost through market crowds and back alleys. His face was hidden beneath a half-cloak, but his eyes were sharp. Focused. He had intercepted a report quiet, buried deep in the palace registry. Sarin Thaler had accessed a nanoscanner. Medical reading, positive for cross-species gestation. Cassian closed the file with trembling fingers. His heart raced, not from anger, but something colder. Doubt. Back in the compound, Elias poured 2 cups of morning brew. He carried one over to Sarin, who sat at the edge of the courtyard, watching the light of Zerios rise across the canyon. "You've been quiet," he said, offering the cup. She accepted it without looking at him. "Is this awkward?" he asked, attempting a smile. Sarin shook her head. "No. Just tired." He watched her, noticing the pallor in her skin, the distant look in her eyes. "You sure you're okay?" Her lips parted, and for a moment, Elias thought she might say it. But she didn't. "I'm fine." They drank in silence. That night, Elias sat at the foot of his bed, scanning diplomatic briefings. His focus waned. His mind circled one question: why did she feel so far away lately? She still spoke to him. Still trained beside him. But something had shifted. He saw how her hand drifted to her abdomen when she thought no one was watching. He saw how she winced at certain smells, or turned away when food was brought. He saw, and he began to suspect. But he said nothing. In a hidden outpost beyond the canyon wall, Cassian cleaned a plasma rifle with mechanical calm. His contact inside the palace had gone silent. The transmission feed had been cut. All he had now were shadows and rumors. But he knew Sarin. He knew how she looked when she was uncertain. And he had seen that look, once, years ago, the last time she had touched him and pulled away. He had told himself then that their story was over. But now? If the child was his, or Elias's. Cashin clenched the rifle until his knuckles whitened. Elias finally asked her the next evening, while they walked under the twin moons of Zerios. "Are you hiding something from me?" Sarin didn't stop walking. "That's an interesting question. It's not meant to accuse," he said. "But something's changed." She turned to face him. Her expression unreadable. "And if I said yes?" He hesitated. "Then I'd ask why you couldn't trust me?" A silence stretched between them. Finally, she whispered, "Because I don't trust myself." And then she walked away. Elias stood beneath the alien sky, the silence around him deeper than ever. In that moment, a storm stirred in the distance. And somewhere, hidden in that gathering darkness, Cashin Rule was watching. The air in the outer districts tasted different, less filtered, sharper, laced with the scent of metal and rebellion. Cashin Rule walked beneath flickering lights, his hood drawn low over his brow, the scars of old loyalties hidden beneath folds of muted gray fabric. He moved like a man who had shed his past and replaced it with armor stitched from secrets. The Zeryan patrols didn't notice him. They weren't meant to. His clearance codes, though revoked publicly, still worked in the right hands. Rebellion wasn't loud, it was surgical. And Cashin was now a scalpel aimed directly at the heart of a crumbling empire. He had not returned to Zerios to reminisce. He had come for Sarin. Reports had reached him, encrypted whispers carried by sympathizers and spies. Of a union forged in spectacle. Of a warrior bound to a foreigner. Of a pregnancy that defied logic and biology. She was being watched, paraded, controlled. He told himself she needed help. He told himself she would welcome him back. But deep beneath the tactical layers of planning and precision, there was something messy. Something far older than loyalty or politics. There was jealousy. At the diplomatic compound, Elias stood at the edge of the training court, a gleaming curved blade in his hand. The courtyard was quiet in the late dusk, stars beginning to pierce the mauve sky. Sarin sparred with a drone, her movements less fluid than usual, her strikes off by milliseconds. He noticed. He noticed everything now. He waited until she deactivated the drone before speaking. "You're distracted." She didn't deny it. "Some shadows are harder to ignore." Before he could press further, the security perimeter chimed a low, pulsing alert. Not an alarm. Just a warning. Something had entered the outer buffer zone. A lone figure approached. Elias narrowed his eyes. The silhouette was familiar. Too familiar. "Stand down," he told the guards as they raised their weapons. "I know him." Cashin Rule stepped into the light. He looked different, leaner, more angular, his features sharpened by time and choices Elias didn't understand. His coat brushed the floor, lined with combat-grade plating beneath civilian disguise. A weapon holstered but visible. And those eyes once full of sardonic wit now burned cold and quiet. You're a long way from the archive decks, Elias said. Cashin tilted his head. So are you. Didn't take you for a husband, Eli. Serin's breath hitched. Why are you here? Elias asked. Cashin's gaze flicked to Serin, then back. To take her with me? Elias's jaw tensed. She's not a prisoner. Cashin stepped closer, the air between them crackling. Isn't she? Look around you. Guards. Schedules. Speeches she didn't write. You think just because they dressed it up with flowers and flags that it's not a cage. Serin moved between them. Enough. Both of you. Cashin looked at her, and for the first time, his voice softened. I heard what they did. I saw the broadcasts. I know you didn't choose this. You don't have to stay here. Elias spoke before she could answer. She chose to stay. With me. Because she had no other option, Cashin shot back. The air tensed. Hands hovered near weapons not drawn, but remembered. Serin stepped forward. You're wrong. I stayed because running doesn't fix everything. I stayed because I'm not a pawn. Not anymore. Cashin studied her, then nodded slowly. Then tell me one thing, is it true? Her breath caught. The child. Silence. A silence so complete it rang. Elias's heart thudded. You knew. Cashin's reply was flat. I suspected. Serin looked away. I don't know. Cashin flinched like she'd struck him. Not from anger. From something deeper. He turned without a word and walked back toward the perimeter, his silhouette shrinking into the purple dusk. Elias didn't move. Neither did Serin. He's changed, Elias said finally. We all have, she replied. But in the long silence that followed, Elias couldn't stop wondering. Which part of her had changed the most? And which part still remembered loving the man who just walked away? The market outpost at Vegafold was a chaos of color, sound, and species. Sprawling structures leaned into one another like drunken friends, patched together with whatever scraps of metal or stone could be salvaged from long-dead empires. It was perfect for hiding. Or pretending that everything wasn't slowly falling apart. Elias Vorn adjusted his cloak as he walked beside Serin through the throngs of vendors and traders, his eyes scanning constantly for threats or for Cashin. The man had vanished again after their last confrontation, but Elias knew better than to believe he was truly gone. Serin kept a pace behind him, her steps deliberate. Her face remained calm, but the tension in her shoulders betrayed the storm beneath. Elias had felt the distance grow like a fault line, each step shaking the fragile peace they had managed to hold onto since leaving the compound. They ducked into a rusted, dim-lit cafe built into the remains of an old landing pod. Inside, Cashin was already waiting, arms crossed, a drink untouched in front of him. He didn't rise. You're late, he said flatly. Elias sat opposite, his tone clipped. We weren't sure you'd show. Cashin's eyes flicked to Serin as she entered. Oh, I was never far. The tension snapped taut in the air between them. Serin remained standing, her back to the wall, arms folded. She said nothing. Cashin leaned forward, voice lower. We need to talk. All of us. Elias gave a dry laugh. What part, Cass? The part where you show up uninvited? Or the part where you try to take her away like I'm some villain in your sad little revenge arc? Cassian's jaw clenched. She doesn't belong to you? No, Elias agreed. She belongs to herself. And she chose to stay. Cassian's voice was a blade. She didn't choose you. She was forced into a role neither of us understand. Sarin cut in, her voice low and steady. Enough. Both of you. They fell silent. She stepped between them, and for a moment, her expression cracked. I can't keep doing this. I didn't ask for any of this. Not the duel. Not the marriage. Not this child. Cassian stood abruptly, his voice cracking with emotion. Then tell us, Sarin. Tell us whose it is. Whose child are you carrying? The question hung in the air like smoke. She looked from one man to the other. Her voice trembled. I don't know. Elias recoiled as if struck. Cassian sat slowly, his shoulders slumping. Sarin covered her face with one hand. I wish I could give either of you certainty. I wish I could undo what this world has done to us. But I can't. I loved you, Cassian. Once. Before all this. And I love you too, Elias. You gave me peace when I didn't believe in it anymore. But that doesn't mean I can change what's happened. Silence crushed the room. Elias rose slowly, his eyes dimmed with fury and heartbreak. Then maybe the only truth here is that none of us belong together? Sarin reached out a hand, but he stepped back. I need air, he muttered, and walked out. Cassian didn't move. Sarin sat across from him, her eyes red, her hands shaking. You got what you wanted, she whispered. He looked at her then, and for a moment, the mask slipped. There was pain there. Real, old, poison pain. But beneath it, something darker had started to bloom. No, he said. Not yet. He reached across the table and gently placed a hand over hers. It was meant to comfort. But his eyes never softened. They only watched. And they burned with something that looked like victory but tasted like ruin. The relay station at the edge of the Vega Fold outpost was built into the skeleton of a crashed cruiser, long since stripped of insignias and allegiance. Its rusted walls groaned with wind, and its COMM tower pulsed dimly like a heartbeat struggling to last. Elias Vorn moved through the corridors with the ease of someone who had walked them before, someone who knew where the real channels lay hidden beneath the official systems. He moved carefully, quietly. The encrypted data shard in his pocket felt heavier than it was, heavy with risk, with truth. The contents were undeniable. Queen Zarina's plan for preemptive strikes against Earth-aligned sectors, thinly veiled as security initiatives. A war born of pride, draped in diplomacy. Elias reached the private uplink terminal, cleared the shielding panels, and activated the stealth transmitter. Holograms flickered to life: Earth intelligence routing nodes, authorization requests, encryption spinners. It was working. Behind him, a soft metallic scrape echoed. Too soft for wind. He didn't turn. I figured you'd follow me, Elias said. Cassian Rule stepped into the corridor, his silhouette sharp against the distant red glow of the relay lights. His coat fluttered in the wind, half shadowing the weapon holstered at his side. You're transmitting data off-world, Cassian said flatly. Elias nodded. Information the galaxy needs to see? You're giving away Zeryo's defense plans. I'm exposing Zarina's lies. Cassian's voice sharpened. Do you think that makes you noble? A traitor with a cause. Elias finally turned to face him. I think it makes me someone who still gives a damn. About peace. About her. About the child. Cassian's hand hovered near his weapon. You think this is about peace? You think you're the only one who cares about her? Elias took a step forward, his voice calm but firm. Then don't stop me. Help me. Help her. Help. Cassian's laugh was hollow. You took everything from me, Elias. You took the mission. The meaning. Her. And now you want me to watch you become a hero too. Elias sighed. He reached into his coat, pulled out the data shard, and held it out. Then take it. Finish it. Tell the truth your way. Just protect her. Protect the child. Mine. Or yours. It doesn't matter anymore. Cassian stared at the shard. At the man before him. At the words that cut through all the noise. He saw no malice in Elias's eyes. Only weariness. And that made it worse. Why won't you fight me? Cassian asked quietly. Because I already did. Every day since we got here. And because you're not my enemy. Cassian drew the weapon anyway. A heartbeat. A single blast. Elias staggered backward, the shard clattering to the floor. He sank to his knees, blinking in disbelief. Cassian stepped forward, caught him before he fell. Elias's voice was a whisper. She still loves you. You know that. And you, Cassian said, his voice cracking. Elias gave the faintest smile. Then maybe neither of us lost. He exhaled once. And didn't inhale again. Cassian sat there, holding him. The wind howled through the relay walls. The transmitter still blinked. The data shard lay between them. Cassian stared down at the body of the only man who had never truly turned against him. And knew, instantly, he would never forgive himself. He picked up the shard. He finished the transmission. And when the message was sent, Cassian didn't leave. He stayed beside Elias, the man he had killed for love and pride, and waited for dawn. It was the first time in years he didn't run. The first thing she saw was the cloak. Sarin stood in the shadowed doorway of the outpost infirmary, the wind howling through the broken vents above her. The figure that stepped from the night carried nothing but a wrapped bundle over one shoulder and the weight of silence. Cassian didn't speak. He simply walked forward and lowered the bundle onto the steel table. Sarin moved as if pulled by gravity. When she peeled back the edge of the cloak, her knees buckled. Elias's face stared up at her, eyes closed, peaceful. Too peaceful. She let out a cry that tore through the walls. It wasn't rage. It was the sound of something sacred breaking. Cashin stood frozen, hands clenched. He didn't look away as she collapsed beside the table, gripping the fabric, whispering his name like it might call him back. "What happened?" she asked, though her voice was hollow. He didn't lie. He was transmitting data. "I thought." Her eyes snapped to his, wide with horror. "You thought what?" "That he betrayed us." He didn't answer. She stared at him, and in that instant, she knew. The truth settled between them like ash. She rose slowly, one hand on her belly. It was swollen now, heavy with life. Her eyes were red but dry. "I should hate you," she whispered. Cashin swallowed hard. "Then hate me. But let me protect what's left of him." She said nothing. The hours passed like smoke. No words. No accusations. She didn't strike him. She didn't scream again. Not even when the labor began. The outpost med unit was powered by backup cells, flickering lights and glitching monitors. A local healer assisted, their hands steady but unsure. Sarin gritted her teeth and refused sedation. She wanted to feel every part of this. The pain. The loss. The truth. Cashin waited outside. He heard everything. Her groans. Her gasps. Her final cry that echoed like thunder. Then silence. He didn't enter until the healer called him. She sat propped up on a narrow cot, her hair damp with sweat, her armor stripped away, replaced with a thin medical wrap. In her arms, swaddled in deep blue fabric, was a child. Cashin stopped. The baby opened his eyes. Blue. Not the sharp glacial hue of Zeryan nobility, nor the storm gray of Cashin's own. But clear. Deep. The same as Elias. Cashin felt something unravel. Sarin didn't look at him. She rocked gently, humming something under her breath. "You should name him," he said finally. She didn't respond for a long time. Then, "No name yet. Not until I can say it without remembering how he died." Cashin stepped closer. His voice cracked. "He gave me a message. Before, he said, protect you. Protect the child. It doesn't matter whose." Sarin looked up at him for the first time. Her eyes were unreadable. "It does matter," she said. "But not in the way you think." Cashin nodded slowly. He lowered himself to the floor beside her, back to the cold wall, and rested his head against it. They sat that way for hours. No weapons. No masks. Just grief, and guilt, and the quiet breathing of a newborn. Outside, Zerios turned beneath alien stars, and the war the Queen had planned crept ever closer. But in that broken corner of the galaxy, for one brief night, there was only a mother, a protector, and a child who would never know the name of the man who had died to keep him safe. The house was small, tucked into a quiet ridge near the northern coast of Earth's new Pacific zone. The waves whispered below, and the stars above blinked through misty clouds. Cashin Roll stood in the doorway of the child's room, watching the boy sleep. 5 years. And not a night passed without Elias's shadow. The boy no longer a newborn, not yet a soldier breathed softly beneath a blanket woven with Zeryan glyphs. His hair had grown pale like Serin's, but his eyes were unmistakable. Elias's eyes. Every time they opened, Cassian saw not himself, but the man he had killed. He stepped inside and sat on the edge of the bed. The child stirred, rolled toward him, and mumbled, "Story. One more. About the hero." Cassian smiled, faint and tired. He pulled the old chair closer and leaned in. "All right," he said. "But just one." He began to speak, his voice soft as the tide. He told the story not of victory, but of choices. Of a man who walked into a war not with weapons, but with truth. Of a man who could have run, but didn't. Who could have fought, but didn't raise his hand. Who stood in the line of fire and offered mercy instead of vengeance. Cassian told the story the only way he knew how. He wasn't perfect, he said. But he was brave. And he gave everything to protect you. Even his last breath. The child's eyes fluttered, then closed. Sleep pulled him under. Cassian sat still, the words lingering in the dark. Later, alone in his study, Cassian unlocked a drawer he never opened in daylight. Inside, wrapped in soft black cloth, lay the light blade Elias's dueling weapon. Still intact. Still humming faintly when touched. The same blade that had once drawn sparks against Serin's. He laid it gently on the desk and stared at it. Some nights, the guilt was loud. Other nights, it whispered like Elias had in his final moments. Protect her. Protect the child. It doesn't matter whose. Cassian reached for the blade, held it upright, and closed his eyes. And there it was again. Not a memory, but something deeper. The final moment, relived over and over. "I won," Elias had whispered, "but you're the one who lives to tell the story." Cassian let the blade rest. He walked to the window and looked out over the starlit ocean. Somewhere, the galaxy still turned. Wars still burned. Serin had returned to her world, her path diverging like the tides. But she had trusted him. With the boy. With the memory. He had no tombstone. No portrait. Only a name spoken at bedtime. Only a story passed from one heart to another. And in the end, that was enough. Cassian smiled sadly. He would never be the hero. He didn't deserve to be. But he would carry the burden. Because some stories weren't about glory. Some were just about living long enough to tell them right. And so, in a quiet house by the sea, under a sky where stars blinked like old regrets, one man remained. To remember. To protect. To atone. Forever.